Welcome to PARCA Technical Sections 1 and 2, which covers hardware, CPU, and memory. For hardware, that really just means the parts inside a computer that they want you to know. And the first part they want you to know is the CPU. The CPU stands for Central Processing Unit. It's often just called the processor. Most people refer to the CPU as the brains of the computer. PARCA likes to call it the heart of the computer. At its core, the CPU takes instructions from a program or application and performs a calculation. And this process breaks down into three key stages: input, processing, and output. Processor speed, how fast this processor works, is measured in megahertz or gigahertz, which is the number of instructions per second the computer can execute. Oftentimes, PARCA will put a question like, what is the unit of measure for processor speed? In which case the answer would just be hertz. Mega and giga are a prefix of hertz. So what is a good processor speed? It would be from 3.5 to 4.2 gigahertz. Processor speed is sometimes referred to as CPU clock speed. I/O path width. I/O means input-output. So the CPU input-output is used to process the input of instructions, do the calculation, and then produce the output from those instructions. So think of it as doors, one for going in the CPU and one for going out. How wide are those doors? They're measured in bits. Standard measurements are 8-bit, 16-bit, 32-bit, 64-bit. The wider the door, the more data you can move in and out of the CPU. RAM and ROM. RAM stands for Random Access Memory. ROM stands for Read-Only Memory. RAM is essentially short-term memory where data is stored as the processor needs it. Sometimes the CPU needs other bits of information to do those calculations, and it puts that data into the RAM and it pulls it back out. RAM is what we call volatile memory, meaning it's cleared every time the computer is turned off. ROM is non-volatile, meaning it's stored forever on that chip. So things that might be stored on that chip are, your startup programs or your printer software, things like that. So you don't want to lose that every time the computer is rebooted. So RAM is a stick. This gold part down here gets placed down into slots in the motherboard. ROM uses prongs. Memory speed and capacity. Memory speed, the speed of the RAM or the ROM, is measured in megahertz. It's millions of cycles per second so that it can be compared to your processor's clock speed. For most desktops and laptops, memory speed can range from the standard 1333 megahertz all the way up to speeds of 2133 megahertz. And memory capacity is the amount of data a device can store at any given time in its memory. Computer performance is the efficiency of a given computer system, or how well it just performs when taking all aspects into account. Memory type and configuration determines performance, memory speed, and capacity. Factors that affect computer performance are processor speed, I/O path width, memory speed, and memory capacity. In general, the bigger the numbers in all these areas, the better the computer will perform. Disk drive. This is also known as hard drive. The hard disk or hard disk drive, HDD, is one kind of technology that stores the operating system, applications, data files, such as documents, pictures, music, that your computer uses. SSDs, or solid-state drives, are storage drives that perform the same functions as hard drives. SSDs use a different kind of technology from HDDs, more like the technology in a USB thumb drive. On computers running Windows, the hard drive is labeled with the letter C. The reason is because it's the first available drive letter for hard drives. The computer reserves A and B for the floppy disk drive and removable media such as tape drives, even if these devices are not installed in the computer. So let's take a look at a hard drive and a solid-state drive. So you can see in the picture that the solid-state drive is a little bit smaller, and it doesn't actually include a disk. It stores all of its information on chips. Right, so that's ROM. Those are the prongs on that board. whereas the hard disk drive has platters or disks. And it usually has two of them. It has an actuator arm. That's how it, those are the differences. That's what a solid state drive looks like, and that's what a hard disk drive looks like. We're going to wrap this up for part 1.